to another episode of TNFro is Reading and the Sunday edition of my show. I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. My Sunday has been filled with naps, the New York Times Sunday paper, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Very misogynistic, yes. Grumpy old cat, got white dude, yes, also. But it does make for some inane binge watching, pleasurable experience. You would think, this being Sunday, that there should not be a lot of cussing, but I make no promises. I will be sharing with you one of the many reasons why I like Sundays and reading the New York Sunday Times, because one of my favorite sections, of course, is the book review. And as a consummate book hoarder, I will be adding to my new barrister bookcase, most definitely with at least 3 volumes based on this Sunday's read. And I will actually be reading from one of the front page review of the book review. My whole goal in life is to eventually have a positive review when said publication. I'll also be talking about Sarah Jessica Parker and her husband Broderick in Arts and Leisure, and how her picture looks like one of the stills from Sex and the City, where I will be going, as well as any other expats, if the 2020 elections don't go the Democratic's way, just saying. And then I'll finish up with my read. Y'all, I thought I was finished with the rewrite of Not My Family. Not so much. And I'll explain to you what I mean about that. And again, as always, I hope you enjoy this publication, this podcast, as much as I've enjoyed creating it. Thanks. So, as part of my general hustle, I am most excited about what I have to do to continue to create content. And it requires that, number one, I continue to do my day job well, but I also gather up content and support from other sources. For a minute there, I tried Fiverr. That was exciting, but I'm limited by my day job. However, there's certain ways that you can actually publish links, Instagram, Facebook, on your blog, that will allow you to fund your passion project. Writer's Block Coffee is one of those things. Not only will it allow me to benefit from my own purchases, I'm actually my best customer, but it also supports what my intent is for this coffee. Writer's Block Coffee has actually been trademarked, and its mission in the industry is to supply writers with those working inside the publishing industry with finest coffee, provide revenue opportunities like me to publishers and other businesses through coffee products. And it's supporting book marketing efforts with custom label coffee, which I am drinking as we speak. Writer's Block Coffee bridges a gap between the coffee and publishing industry. Coffee shops are great for hosting writing and reading activities, but their services stops at the door. That's where Writer's Block Coffee starts. By offering coffee for every stage of a book's life, from the writing to the marketing, Writer's Block Coffee reimagines the role of coffee as a partner and not an accessory. This experience informs every step of Writer's Block Coffee takes, from the taste of the coffee to the shape of the partnerships. And I am a proud publisher of the links for you to enjoy this coffee too. So navigate to writersblockcoffee.com/TNFro is reading to find out about this, as well as the swag, and also enter the TNFro is reading promo code in to get 10% off of your order and shipping. And tell them that Felicia sent you. So, what does TNFro read on a Sunday afternoon? I read basically anything. This Sunday found me with my favorite pastime, going to the store, getting the New York Sunday Times, kind of skimming the initial pages and the initial sections because it's about bull crap about the mismanagement of coronavirus and international despots across the world, and how they are mistreating their own people. Um, I hate giving the double middle finger to an administration, so I kind of skim through that. I look at the obituaries because I'm always intrigued by who has passed away and what they did and how their family is honoring them. I also like to navigate. Then I kind of look at the review, Sunday review, business, as well as the sports pages. But it just seems that I always end up with probably three most important parts of the paper are the Sunday book review, arts and leisure, as well as Sunday styles. 4, travel. These are the parts of the paper that originally got me hooked on the New York Sunday Times. I've been reading it for almost, I think, at least 20 years now. It's to me, the reading the Sunday Times is the ultimate act of bougie and uh, sophistication. I like the old gray lady. In the past few years, I have been actually reading the New York Times book review. And in this book review, I will probably be adding a number of the books. In particular, I'm always fascinated by Brooklyn and how it's changed, not just because of Jay-Z. It's because I think my cousin Viva has actually made Brooklyn cool as well as her cool collection of friends. But there's just so much creativity that is a part of that particular part of the city and in that borough. And James McBride is no exception. He wrote a book called Deacon King Kong, and it's not usually, I try to be open-minded when I read these book reviews, but it's just so happened the New York Times book review has also bought me Wyvern, the flash dancing, vodka swilling, uh, dragon that lives in the Louisiana bayou. So I'm thinking they really good at picking out some very, very good books. But I think Brooklyn Brew is going to be a part of that because this guy, the main antagonist, is the reminds me of Everybody's Drunk Uncle. And it reads like this. This was written by Juana Diaz. It's September 1969, and Deacon Cuffy Lambkin is about to become a dead man walking. Well, to be accurate, Sportcoat, as he's better known, is about to become more of a dead man walking, having miraculously brushed off 3 strokes and a job-like torrent of near-fatal afflictions. Sportcoat has been pronounced dead more often than Michael Myers of, I think that's Friday the 13th fame. But this time things are looking kind of terminal. On someone else, this fate might be a crusher, but Sportcoat is the type of stubborn coot on whom doom roasts lightly, if at all. Besides, our hero has a bigger worries than his own death foretold. The church Christmas fund his wife was safekeeping is missing, and certain members of the Five Inns Baptist Church of South Brooklyn are beginning to wonder whether old Deacon Sportcoat might not be responsible. Sportcoat is the vexatious heart of James McBride cracking new novel, Deacon King Kong. With his pork pie hat and his Garrett's jacket, Sportcoat is a beloved fixture of the Causeway houses, the Red Hook projects, and Clark Kent glasses. A wiry, laughing, brown-skinned man who had cough, wheeze, hack, guffaw, and drank his way through the cause houses for a good part of the 71 years. Sportcoat reads like something out of Zora Neale Houston, updated by Paul Beatty, a walking genius, a human disaster, Assad, a medical miracle, and the greatest baseball umpire that the cause houses has ever seen. The old man is also a sot who dedicates much of his free time and most of his work time to getting King Kong drunk on the local King Kong hooch. Oh, that's hysterical. But all that liquor hasn't knocked Sportcoat out of the game. He still attends church. He still has more odd jobs than fingers. Still helps everyone with almost anything. He's the neighborhood handyman and gardener, rabbit, and Radagast the Brown all in one. And it goes on to detail probably deeply intuitive and highly entertaining and tragically comic rendition of Mr. Sportcoat and all of his foibles in the projects of Brooklyn. And it also just brings to mind how fascinated I am and have always been about Brooklyn, the outer boroughs, and how it lives. How is it to live in such an iconic city? And I think that's going to be a massive and welcome addition to my library. I'm also into these biographies of sorts, and this one about a character by the name of Robert Parkin Peters is no exception. It's about the title of this article is Bearing False Witness, how a phony priest and academic duped Oxford in an enchanted famous historian. And this is by Lawrence Osborne. A con man is only as good as his charm. Frank William Abagnale, reincarnated by Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. I don't think I saw all of that, or I think I fell asleep on it. Inhabited half a dozen identities by the time he was 21, and did so with such brio that he was able to fool hundreds. Charles Ponzi was a dapper operator who tooled around in a locomobile. And Ronnie Cornwell, the father of the novelist John Le Carre, was an insurance fraudster who later became the model for a charismatic Rick Pym in the Le Carre's A Perfect Spy. The most famous image of Cornwell shows him in a top hat and buttonholes striding confidently through the top-class English crowd with a look of knowing concentration mixed with offhand breeziness. You can feel the charm coming off the image. In Adam Sisman's amusing and elegantly written biography of the mid-century British imposter, Robert Parkin Peters excitedly styled Peters the Parsons and Romeo of the Church by the Yellow Press. The subject is a curious and relatively harmless man of many faces who managed to attract the attention of one of Britain's most august modern historians. The suavely aristocratic and yet strangely gullible Hugh Trevor Roper of M16 fame and all the Nazi diaries was duped by this guy. When he received a letter from Peters trying to enlist his help in warding off suspicious Oxford staff and trying to make his case that he was being falsely prosecuted when in fact he was a fraud and he needed to get the ham sandwich out of there. Because by that time he had married throughout his fraudster career 7 different women, defrauded the university, but he still died relatively obscure and penniless until Sisman basically publishes The Professor and the Parson, a story of desire, deceit, and defrocking, and tells the story again. I think it's just amazing how a nonfiction story comes to light, and it's just that you can't make these types of people up for no reason. And what else? There was another book that I was interested. Oh, here it is. Interested in possibly getting. It's about Southside Stories, a debut collection, resurrects 1990s housing project in Chicago, and it's the State Ways Garden. It's 266 pages. How this family of boys basically raises themselves in these high-rise cement block prisons in the time of the crack cocaine um, epidemic, and how they were just at the mercy of Chicago PD and an unfair foster and prison reform system. That is another book that I actually definitely will be adding to my collection, as well as the Overground Railroad, the Green Book, and the Roots of Black Travel in America, and Driving While Black, African American Travel and the Road to Civil Rights. How the automobile became a symbol of our mobility and safety in a racist society. Because if you always had to sit in the back of the bus, the back of the train with no bathrooms, and you were target to being pulled off and beaten to death in the deep South, and actually some points in the Midwest too, your car was your salvation to get the ham sandwich and away from the lyncher's noose. I'm just saying. After seeing the Green Book, I actually really like that movie. Um, these books actually are apropos and also tell the tales that may have been lost as travel through the South as an African American, probably from the early part of the 20th century on through the 70s. I'm actually really looking forward to though purchasing those, as well as something I'm also completely interested in as a side note because it's just so different. It is called The Aosawa Murders, the strange, engrossing novel patched together from scraps of interviews, letters, newspaper articles, and the like, and explores the sweltering day that 17 members of the same family died after drinking poisoned sake and soda. Who would want to kill another family except for somebody else? Were they mobbed up? Who knows? I think that's going to probably be the fifth or sixth book that I'm going to add just from the recommendation and them detailing this book in this Sunday's New York Times book reviews. And again, I'm a book hoarder, and these are several volumes that I plan on reading through the next several months. Join me. Check them out of your library. Order them from the secondhand store through a Libris, and you can use they always it's a massive array of books that are available on that site. And the shipping's always pretty cheap, and you can actually add all of these additions to your collection and complete and utter entertainment, and also expand your fund of knowledge. Navigate to alibris.com, check them out, and you'll actually find some pretty good deals on some amazing books, not just the ones that I've actually listed in this segment of my Tennessee Fro is Reading podcast, but also certain out of print books you can actually probably find on that site. So, this part of the podcast is simply more of the New York Times book review. And I attempt to read anyways, for the most part, basically cover to cover from the New York Times. I get my inspiration, as I said previously, from the travel section, from even the business section, arts and leisure, even the obituaries, and the book review. This part, and for a while there, because I have so much PTO, and I'm getting ready to get hopefully another bonus through my day job But I was planning on going back to New York and have a fun-filled several days of just going back to New York City and going to several Broadway shows. However, COVID-19 and the mismanagement of the coronavirus epidemic, I ain't going to New York anytime soon. So I'm planning on spending as much time in disease-free, well, I perceive to be disease-free Tennessee as much as I possibly can. But I still do get a kick out of reading and reporting on some of the goings on in the city. I was a fan after it went off air of Sex in the City. And I can truly say that I never saw either Sex in the City 1 or the second movie when it was in the movie theaters. I saw both of them on streaming services. But I had an appreciation for the fashion, the shoes, the purses, uh, of the characters in that um, movie or in the show when it was on TV. I particularly like the sexual fluidity and daringness of the Samantha character. But Sarah Jessica Parker, of course, was the main character. And in one, I remember distinctly one of the episodes where she stayed up late and basically just decided she was going to stay up all night and show up to a fashion shoot the next day. And she looked cray cray. She had been smoking and mainlining Starbucks coffee, and she looked like something that the cat drug in. Her picture from the opening of her and Matthew Broderick, that's who he did, that is. Matthew Broderick, her husband of 23 years, show on Broadway soon. A Neil Simon reboot. She looks like that the Carrie character from Sex and the City. Dark eyeliner, the makeup, pancake makeup, accentuating her winkles. It's not a good look, and it's something called. It's about a play that takes place in the '60s of several different couples in a Plaza Hotel. But her character looks like one of those characters, that character from Sex and the City, and I thought it was apropos that I would actually put that together because, again, I didn't start watching Sex and the City until it was already off of the air, and I didn't see either of the movies in the movie theater. It was definitely on streaming services, but go figure. And also, one of my other pastimes in reading the travel part of the New York Times is reading the business section, job postings, as well as the travel section. In this week, I basically got a glimpse of, and I'm going to probably be just mentioning this in most of my episodes, where the expatriates are going to go after if Trump or Chump gets reelected. Because I have made it plain that I'm not going to be able to stay here. I'm not going to be able to tolerate another 4 years of mismanagement, dismantling all of the all of the advances of the last 20 years. People getting fired just because he and his cronies can't understand anything, and basically we're of a return to a highly suspect time when only a few people actually were happy and made advances, and when a vast majority of America what did without. But these people that are following and supporting this guy blindly is going to lead this country to even greater debauchery. And why would you want another 4 years of that? But there are a lot of people that agree. Black, white, or indifferent. They agree with this jackass. And I'm tired of giving the double middle finger to the news. I'm willing to take my savings and head out because it's not worth it. It really is not worth it. But I'm trying to think of places where I would want to be an expatriate, preferably warm, and that I could live for 4 years off of my current savings. But where would I go with those specifications and could easily make the transition back to the United States when the nonsense is over? One of those places is is St. John. Jeffrey Epstein has a massive resort or property became a prison for young women. I think is actually on St. John, but this tropical mountain reboot is up for sale for 1.65 million. Yeah, I would be an Airbnb guest or one of the caretakers for this property. But I think I could actually live pretty nicely in the confines, reading and writing up in the mountains of St. John. There's also, when you navigate over to the business section of not only homes, etc., that are available, you actually come across a listing for what appears to be a bar and restaurant for sale. Because it also in St. John's. It says great opportunity, a 15-room hotel for sale, turnkey investment with 9.75 capital range. I think that's what it says. But then again, I'm kind of old and I can't see this all that well. It says also prime location, 1 minute walk to the ferry, deck, and beach. Mix of owned and long term lease. Very strong. And it's up for 5 million. They give a number. I think that will be fascinating because it also says in the business section that United States citizens, you have to do your due diligence, get title insurance as well as an inspection, just like you would do here. But that type of property could be filled up with like-minded expats, kind of expats that want to sit out the next 4 years but don't want to give up their citizenship and want accessibility to come back to the United States just in case. That is a possibility. I would be very interested in hearing what the listening audience think about that, and see if there are how many other like-minded individuals would like the opportunity to either go to St. John's. I was thinking about Portugal. I was also thinking about New Zealand. If you notice, all the places that I'm mentioning all are relatively warm, and the cost of living ain't so crazy. And they're also all are seaside. Can you imagine living in paradise, being able to work in paradise and get up, get to work, but you actually work where you live too, and other people that are almost just like you with some differences and different flavors also get to share in that bounty. I think that would be cool. And I would also like to be somewhere where it would be easy to have an on-site garden where we can actually grow what we actually need and supplement with proteins from the sea, and effect a change, decrease carbon imprint, raise our own food, and not have crazy people like the survivalists out in Washington, Vixen or Lynx, whatever her dreadlock wearing name is, who is completely off her antipsychotics. And I don't think I can roll with some dreadlock links from Washington. That's just me. But on the real, if Chump stays in there for another 4 years, I'm out. I'm seriously, I'm not going to be able to stay here, and I'm just looking for options about where to go. But again, that's just me. So Curb Your Enthusiasm is one of those shows that you know that you're going to hell for watching and laughing at. I find it absolutely amusing to watch this show. And I'm just saying. But anyways, um let's see. When I decided back in October, November time, actually it was October time frame that I was going to rewrite my book, Not My Family. It was right in time for the November, the National Writing Challenge, NaNoWriMo, for the entire month of November. And I knew from talking to friends that, I'm grateful that they bought the book. But one of my friends, Cheryl, said something very compelling. She said she was actually confused by some of the book and it was kind of hard to follow because the family ties of Not My Family was just so intertwined. And in reality, first of all, my book dropped in May of 2019. It is loosely based on my family and life. And I wrote, it's a what is used to be called published by a vanity press author house, um, where it's self-published. But I wish I had taken more time to what I'm doing now is almost line editing. I'm going through the book. I basically rearranged the entire book, the table of contents, and also the actual content of the book itself. Each chapter I've expanded upon since the National Writing Month challenge. The book itself has gone from novella 22,000 words, and it's going to be probably over 40,000 words. So I've basically doubled the length of the book. My whole goal also is to get real line editing where I submit the book. They can do a massive rewrite and they or make suggestions on how I could rewrite the book itself and send it back to me instead of submitting it through um, software that is just glorified proofreading for $400 to $600, which is completely ridiculous. I thought I was on the last chapter as far as the rewrite itself, but come to find out, my Mac was not continually and consistently updating all of the chapters that I had written or thought I had rewritten and uploaded to the cloud on Dropbox. So when I got to the last chapter and edited it I found out that all of the rewritten parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, parts 1 and 2 were nowhere to be found. And my Mac is actually in North Carolina, where I've been here in Tennessee for the last several weeks. And that was actually very disconcerting because I've bought a new computer, which is primarily for gaming, but that's neither here nor there. But I did not have access to the rest of the book, and what I found out is that I needed to go over and possibly rewrite a vast majority or 50% of the book. Part 4, the last part of the book of Becoming Frannie, is actually completed. I'm sure there's much more work that has to be done to it, but I'm more interested in seeing in the additions of parts 1 and 2 as a rewrite of the first part. This is how the first section ends. It's called The Other Shoe Drops. And in colloquialism, that means when you're going along your way and then you get that call where somebody calls you and they tell you something crazy. So that is the premise for basically this book. So when I rewrote this, I had that in mind. And it goes just like this. Nothing in my life thus far has been normal. For the most part, I've been okay with that. I have learned a certain amount of detachment works with a family with a serious generational curse. And that's the other thing that I'm finding out as I rewrite my book, that I need to get the tense right. Because this is autobiographical fiction, if I'm going to use I and me and we, etc., it has to be consistent throughout the book. That's why, as I I rewrote the last chapter and I changed it around. And if it sounds like the rest of the book is I and me, then the last chapter, the denouement as an adult, should actually also be written in the same tense, and same pronouns. That's when you rewrite a book, you have to keep those things in mind. But anyways, it has it has I've I need to change that. I'm just going to delete that part. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to fall, because it could be a call that someone has advanced cancer at the age of 3. A young man with so much promise eat his gun in the city park to just stop the pain, or someone has a massive stroke but had looked awful for months. What is a generational curse? A curse is the hopeless continuation of emotional pain, bad luck, and general screwed upness wished upon everyone in your immediate circle and continued by any progeny who may happen to be a product of any sexual encounters. It follows everyone and everything associated within the same family. It's a legacy of pain. The progeny of my mother's family is part of this or such a curse. Is part of such a curse. Oops. There are some of the worst kept secrets, affairs, and in some instances rapes. Ron, for all of his faults, suffer from the same generational curse, making it remarkable he and his sisters are still upright and choose life, although the life they chose was fraught with con games and general shenanigans. They never had anyone to tell them they are worthy and don't have to accept poor treatment from anyone. Life is about more than surviving. You can make mistakes, but success is all about how fast you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get moving. I wish my mother could have believed this, and even if Ron could have known this, their flaws and their flight from their personal demons would consume them their entire adult lives. If they had access to extensive psychological help, they could have been healed and became the glimpses of solid, productive individuals seen in Texas. They settled for returning to the broken individuals of their youth in Virginia, who couldn't pour into them what they needed because they were so broken. I have the proof of who they were, who they could have become, from the photos in my biological father's trunks. They were all so beautiful. They were all, at all. And life jumped off of the photos, if you can feel that from still photos. There were reams and reams of photos, letters, organized albums with a pictorial history of a time before the first deployment to Vietnam. So much potential loss. Ron being drafted into the infantry and going to basic training in Texas with Darlene and Angela in tow was the start of an unexpected narrative. There were missteps and altered paths, but through their mistakes, I came into being. Though the pictorial history, I found that Ron Butler was actually one of the groomsmen in Darlene and Tony's wedding. What in the world was up with that? Ron actually dated and was dumped by several of Tony's female cousins, but these wise females rapidly became aware of his psychological pathology. After a particular violent argument with one of these cousins, which ended in her throwing a hatchet at him and missing his retreating back by inches, that ended his dating any other member of the Purcell family. My true self was almost obliterated by the deep depression and ill-conceived self-protection of my mother, Darlene. I would be a little worse for wear on the other side, slightly ticked off that it would take almost 50 years to find me, Frannie Purcell, again. but better late than never. I would sit for hours with my father, grandfather, and great uncle Sippy, aka John, and they would share a rich oral history about the Purcell relations, which were fascinating. My discovery of my true roots would transverse from Plymouth Rock because the first Purcell may have been related to a passenger on the Mayflower only with the designation Blackamoor in the captain logs. We would follow the trade routes with the original white captains and tugboat pilots as an indentured servant from the eastern shore of Virginia, North Carolina, along the Tennessee, Alabama, Gulf of Mexico, Comanche Nation in Texas, and along the Texas Road to Oklahoma and back to San Padre. Extended family will wash up on shore of Ellis Island from Algiers during the early part of the 20th century to settle in Texas Panhandle as most African Americans were running out of the South for their lives and from the lynchers' rope with my grandmother Emma's Partisne Patterson family running from religious and racial persecution in Muslim Algiers with mostly two changes of clothes, several spools of white fine silk thread and finished lace, with the technique taught to them by the ancient nuns in the convent school of the Coptic Christian church in Algiers. There were also faded pictures of an aunt who followed one of the other students to Paris, Elaine Partis, wardrobe supervisor of the Paris Ballet, and whose progeny of her daughter and son managed her shop until the 1950s. My life as Maria Butler is always wary of happiness and good feelings because you are always ready for the other shoe to drop, to evaporate happiness. I heard so many good things about the Purcells, but were they too perfect? For the most part, the Purcells and our extensions were upstanding, law-abiding citizens, albeit a little, shall we say, light-fingered. A large group of Purcells on the Alabama Gulf Coast with original Latino surnames originated from the tobacco fields in Cuba. They would arrive on the Florida shore with young Palito Cubano, the tobacco plant of the Cuban cigar variety, wrapped and secured to the bodies of the refugees to be planted on the Poblano Purcell farm in Alabama, which no one knew was stolen from the large Cuban plantation until, well, now. Or Virginia and Tennessee transplant with cuttings from the plantation grapevine and Scottish bourbon recipes committed to memory to be shared and recreated for 7 generations of Purcells. There is a really sketchy branch of the Purcell river barge operators and steamboat captains that navigated the mighty Mississippi from the mouth of New Orleans and Baton Rouge, Suwanee, the locks of the Tennessee River. The Red River runs the Missouri River and saw Yellowstone and Old Faithful with our Choctaw Purcell relatives before Roosevelt and the rest of white America. All of this was contained in the leather wrap journals of second and third cousins in old steamer trunks stored in the belly of house ships, attics of family homes, and many of the sheds on the ancestral property. They were blockade and embargo runners for the British, Spanish, and the French. Legend has it few working with the likes of Blackbeard and the alligator hunters of the Louisiana Bayou. They ruled the waterways for 2 centuries, hiding in plain sight. An entire family had lived on the Tennessee for years, and I had lived in Chattanooga for 3 years before I would meet them at my pier along the Tennessee that runs through Lookout Mountain. Who am I supposed to become is a collection of genetics and experiences, my potential only limited by me. I am becoming a Purcell, and I'm finally recognized why I do things and think the way I do through the history of my family. I recognize the adventurous spirit and love of the water from my steamboat captain family members and engineer cousins. I am part of the good and bad, and I can choose to recognize and work through all those parts of who I am and who I am to come without shame, but with immense grace. Wow. I have to call my father now and hear more stories. And that ends how the other shoe um, drops. Um, a lot of this, actually, all of this was actually the additions to this particular part of the story was actually written as I sat riverside and just discovered the beauty of the Tennessee River. And although this is creation from my head, I wish, and it probably is. Just have no idea. Maybe I just need to do more research. But this is the history that I wish, and that is probably buried in someone else's family history. And this is how I actually ended the book. It went from just a little over 700 words to about 1,200, 1,300 words. But this is the denouement as an adult. So what happens to Maria Butler? She was fiction, and like all bad stories, that narrative came to an end as Frannie Purcell reasserted herself, but it always seemed the ghost of Maria Butler's abusive childhood floated around the edges, popping up like a roach or a rat at an elegant dinner party. But working through Maria's pain would be Frannie's salvation. If Frannie had never become Maria, she would never have been rewarded with a return to the Purcell fold, whose family had deep roots and had served in every major war from the Revolutionary War to Afghanistan. She had deep roots in the Oklahoma black settlement along the old Texas road, with Confederate double agents and Union saboteurs as her kin. The Purcell also had ties to the Choctaw Nation, as well as deeper roots in the tobacco and cotton fields in the rich bottomlands in Alabama. Hers was a family of adventurers, men and women alike, riders, educators, hunters, scouts, fishermen, and mountain climbers out of necessity. We were a family that existed and prospered in plain sight. We were not spared the brutality and carnage of Jim Crow, nor the lynch mob's rope. Unfortunately, my cousins were simply numbers spoken about in the papers back east, or spoken about by Miss Ida Wells' anti-lynching lectures of the early 20th century. But we persevered and survived and lived to tell the story. My mother's story did not end with her death. Darlene's story was tragic for the most part, with her own undoing by her design. The depth of her story and demons would be revealed in the thousands of cards and letters she exchanged with my biological father over years. I would find cards and letters addressed to me, all yellowed with age, with deposit slips and cash receipts attached, numbering in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But she died with less than $100 in her bank account and little insurance to cover her burial. She used my father for decades as her personal ATM through me, but died penniless. I wish someone had showed me the cards and read me all of those letters, because contained within was the love of a man that loved his daughter. They were filled with goofy stories about Martians and magical Texas Longhorn steers and wily old cats that could have given Dr. Seuss a run for his money. How different our lives would have been if she thought she was worthy of not only all those sweet words, but the love he and the Purcells were waiting to shower on her. Frannie's relationship with Aunt Myrtle, Angela, and most of my maternal family would remain strained and mostly distant, but would change. But what changed were her reactions to their behavior. I would find out by several conversations with the cousin that maintained the Butler family Facebook page just how entwined the Sampson family was to the Butlers, going back to North Carolina as well as Eastern Shore of Virginia. I never really had a relationship with Ronald Butler after his divorce from Darlene, and only peripherally as I transitioned back to a Purcell. I learned that you could teach an old dog new tricks, but the dog had to be willing. In this instance, he was not willing because he didn't see his way, suspecting logic. I think the years of drug and alcohol abuse left his brain like Swiss cheese. Frannie learned to forgive you for toxicity and abuse committed in her youth, but she sure wasn't going to expose herself to that toxicity voluntarily. My relationship with Aunt Myrtle depends on the time of day. If you don't request too much of her, ask her to give more social support or financial support than she's willing to give outside of her own terms, she's fine. Once she gave up on me or another Purcell taking over the management of Angela and stopped blaming me for her son Craig's issues, we could have short civil conversations. She's now resigned that family Purcell can't be Christian bully to do anything that doesn't make sense. Angela finally found a counselor who set her up with a full team of people outside of Aunt Myrtle's church. They were able to get her a life coach, a financial counselor, and a personal trainer, which has allowed her to see her own strength and positivity. She can now see herself achieving, and she feels comfortable participating in positive relationships. She's changed so much that her children don't call me to pick them up and have not asked to live with me for months because living at home with her is actually good. She had so much financial success that she was able to afford a down payment on a townhouse. She worked as a lab tech for a hospital for years, but she was able to get work as an administrator for an online shopping club that my grandmother and my grandmother's sisters ran. She books appointments, shops, arranges deliveries for the members. Her efforts led to several thousand more members. She likes to shop with other people's money, and she has eye for quality stuff without paying above retail. When she tries to self-sabotage, there are checks and balances within the platform. She can bounce things off of the life coach and the psychiatrist who is within the platform and who helps administer her medication. She hasn't completely imploded for 18 months. She went from completely tragic figure to a very positive person and became easier and easier to be around. Frannie and Angela seem to get a kick out of calling each other cuz because she comes to terms with the reality of her birth and lack of sisterhood, but she's able to visit Frannie and the Purcell extended family with a lot of drama. She can be friends with people without demanding anything emotionally. She finally seems happy. She went with the Purcells on an extended cruise and had a blast. Some things brought overseas were offered on the family website. All of us who went on the trip came back stronger and more positive. What could happen to a little girl who finds out she was either switched at birth or not even related to her family? She can either take the information and implode or deal with it in a positive way. Isn't life about a sequence of events that make you happy or sad for a moment, and then you go on and become happy again? What exactly is family? We have to investigate the things that bind people more than genetic links. We need to question conventional marriages and other conventional relationships. I think all of us will end up in some type of psychological quagmire and may not see a road forward if we don't break through some of the archaic definitions of good relationship and trauma. Frannie had to learn anger and hate are natural and have a role in a human response, but how we deal with those responses defines how we actually are going to live and experience things going forward. When we waste time on anger and hatred, we could be doing something else. You can become spiritually bankrupt by wasting your energy on that anger and hatred and envy because those things keep you from growing if you don't apply them appropriately. The past 3 years have been about sorting out the dynamics of the Purcell family, learning about new relations, and learning about the history I did not even know about. The prospects of the future could have overwhelmed me, but I can say I'm stronger for the experience. Would I want to go through it again? No, but I'm. This podcast is my path of entertainment and a form of therapy and an outlet for creative freedom. But if you don't have this outlet and you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or addiction. Call 1-800-273-8255. It's available 24 hours a day, every day. And there's also an on-site chat feature at suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat/. If vodka is your problem, call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. Then there's also apps like TalkSpace and Doctor on Demand that will actually be able to help you right where you are in the privacy of your car at a fraction of the cost of conventional therapy. It's okay not to be okay, and it's definitely okay to ask for help. Please navigate to www.Dale's Angels Inc. for all special offers and updates on nerd news. As well as you can drop me a line at TennesseeFroisReading@gmail.com or even leave me a 2-minute non-trolling message at 423-463-0658. All non-trolling messages may actually be read or played during the podcast. If you like what you're hearing and you want to support continued great content, please become a patron at podbean.com/thetalkingfro or put 5 on it and leave me a tip at paypal.me/FeliciaDAI. And I hope you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I have enjoyed creating it. Thanks.